Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast. My name is Barbara Thompson. Each week, I'll be bringing you a self-care expert or a message to help you to discover how to live your best life and understand your mind-body connection. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let the Studio Chat begin. Thanks so much for joining me today on this episode. Before we get into the chat that I had with Val Kleinhans, I wanted to just mention a couple of things here in this episode. We do talk about suicide in this episode, so I wanted to let anyone know that if you are experiencing any emotional distress at the moment, or you know anyone in your life that is experiencing it, there is access to a 24-hour crisis support and suicide prevention service in Australia, and that is called Lifeline, and that number is 13 11 14. You can call it 24/7. It's free because no one in Australia has to face their darkest moments alone. So I wanted to mention that, but also, this is number 79. This is the 79th episode. I've been lucky enough to not have any internet connection issues, but for some reason in this episode, there are a couple of times where they're very brief, but the conversation with Val does come in and come out. So I just want to let you know, just to bear with us. It is such a fantastic episode, and I absolutely do want you to listen to the end. It only happens a couple of times, but I just wanted to give you a heads up, and it just annoyed the heck out of me because I want you to, the reason why I do this podcast is for you to enjoy whether it's me or someone talking, and to be able to enjoy, there's nothing worse, enjoy the episode. There's nothing worse than listening to something and you can't hear it properly or the audio is not good. So, so let's just dive in to my chat with Val. I know you're going to enjoy it. It was just so refreshing to hear someone that, her dream was, she's a broadcaster and her dream was always to work in radio. And when she got that job, if any of you can resonate to this, it was like, oh, this is not what I've signed up for. And it opened her eyes to a whole new way of getting constant criticism for the smallest things and unspoken rules and having ear checks with no encouragement, and just really it causing her self-confidence and self-esteem to take a really big dive because, her bosses were saying to her, you're not performing at work. And she was on air as well. So I'd love you to, join me on this episode as I talk to Val Kleinhans all about working in the radio industry, being on air, experiencing all sorts of ups and downs, and I'm going to let her take it away. Enjoy. Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast, where today I have a guest and her name is Val. Hi, Val. Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast.
Hello. It's wonderful to be here. It's nice to be the interviewee for a change instead of being the one interviewing people.
Yeah, well, no pressure. I know that you're very experienced in interviewing people, and I kind of just do it from what's the saying, like the seat of my pants, or I just kind of
fly by the seat of your pants, just natural.
That's how I roll. So whereabouts are you today? Where are you located?
I'm home in Minnesota right now. So I'm in the US.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how we've connected on social media. That's the awesome thing about social media. And why I asked you to be on my podcast is you're a jack of all trades. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 podcasts.
I'm not busy at all. But yeah, that's true. I do. And they all serve a different purpose. You've been kind enough to be part of One More Light, which is my mental health oriented podcast. I've got one for more style and pop culture things called Very Vogue. And then I have another one for music, which is interviews with, musicians and fans, called All Octaves. And my other one, just because I like to get spooky and paranormal sometimes, is Chilling Chatter. So yeah, I'm not busy.
I love all of that. And I see that you've got a broadcast channel called Tiny Meatballs.
Yes, my tiny meatballs are just fans of tiny meatballs like myself. I joke because I'm Italian American. and I am a curvy little meatball. I'm only 5'1" and I'm a size 14. So I just love the expression. I got it from Jersey Shore. Huge show, hilarious, because I feel like I'm watching my cousins and my aunts and my uncles on it, and my friends. But yeah, so it's kind of a joke between me and my fans. Like, I just call them the tiny meatballs because I'm a tiny meatball. If you like me, you're also a tiny meatball.
I love that. And I think anyone tuning into this podcast today, it's all about well, I know one of your podcasts is mental health, so can we start there? Can I ask you
Yeah.
why you started, like why you have all of these podcasts? And first of all, the mental health. Why did you want to start a podcast talking about mental health?
Well, I'm glad you phrased the question that way, because they definitely both sort of go hand in hand. The reason that I podcast and the reason that I have chosen to spoke about my mental health. So before podcasts became a thing, and in my view, they only became a thing during the pandemic, like in 2020. That's when I started to pay attention to them anyway. And I think that's when most of the world started to pay attention to them as well. But before that, I actually had an on-air job on terrestrial radio in the States. And I did it in a few different states here in the US. And while I loved the idea of playing music and talking with people about music, that was something I always wanted to do. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a broadcaster, whether it was like a video DJ or a radio DJ. I just always wanted to do it. I would make up my own tapes. And when I was a teen and got really obsessed with music, I was always told I spoke well too. So at 17 or 18 years old, in the States anyway, that's when our education system forces you to start to think about what it is you want to do for a living and where you want to continue your school, college, university. So when it was time to start thinking about what I wanted to do with that, I chose a local university that specialized in journalism and broadcast and the arts. And I graduated from there 4 years later. In the meantime, I had an internship with local Pittsburgh radio stations. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the States originally. So it's a rundown older city with a big Italian American, Irish American, and German American population. We love, and we're pretty expressive about it. So it's a great place to just talk, get to know people, and express yourself. And I never had anybody tell me that, the way I was expressing myself was odd, talking with my hands, things like that. So when I was doing that on the radio, it was okay there, but I wasn't on the air there. I was more so an assistant that was making sure the radio station didn't blow up. Like, I was literally watching the production board and watching how the sound came out of it to make sure that the mechanics of the radio station were running well. And eventually I just knew that I wanted to be on the air. So once I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do that in my own home city, and the reason I wasn't able to is because when radio hosts get jobs in a bigger city like that, at least in the States, they stay there for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes.
Yeah.
So you could be waiting a long time before you get to be the Howard Sterns of the world or the Ryan Seacrests of the world. Like, it takes a minute. So I was told, we love you. Obviously, we think you're talented, but you just got to get some experience somewhere else first. So I said, okay. And I ended up moving to Illinois, which is in the central part of the US. And it's very much cornfields and farms outside of Chicago. Chicago's another great city, and it's another big city, but I wasn't quite in Chicago. This is 2 hours outside Chicago.
Okay.
So yeah. So but that was the first place that gave me the ability to be on the air. And I was doing country radio, and I was doing top 40 and like pop radio. So it was a lot of Kesha, lots of Wood, lots of Katy Perry, like bouncing between those two stations. I did a lot for them. And that got kind of old because I started to see the politics of the industry at that point. And what I mean is I started to understand that there was less and less creative freedom. I went into the radio industry thinking I was going to have control over the playlist, and I was going to have control over the content that I put out over the air. And that was not the case whatsoever. You're told what to play, you're told what to say, and you're told how long you can say it for.
Wow.
If you have, for example, for example, if you have 10 seconds of an introduction to a song, let's say it's Kesha's TikTok, and before she hits wake up in the morning, like you have before she hits that, you have 10 seconds. That's your allotted time to talk, and you get nothing else. They didn't want you to stop the music. They wanted you to use introductions like that. And that was it. And if you were talking any longer than that, you were talking too long. Even in commercial, even going into like commercial breaks, they didn't want you to do any funny bits. They didn't want you to get creative. They wanted you to promote station events and keep things, in my opinion, very watered down, very basic. And it was hard, in my opinion, it's hard to form a community around that, doing things that way. I enjoy getting personal with my listeners and even my social media audience now, but I didn't have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And I was starting to get criticized for little things that, little unspoken rules that I was supposedly breaking. And I just had a real problem with my boss at the time at that particular station. After so much critique, radio hosts go through what's called an air check. And an air check is essentially somebody listening to your audio resume. They're playing back an hour or so of what you've done. They're taking a sample of what you've done for your show, and they're saying, I like this, I don't like this, blah, 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 blah. They're analyzing it with a fine-tooth comb. And a lot of the times, those critiques end up being very subjective and not necessarily constructive. There wasn't, well, I see what you were doing here, but why don't we try and do X instead if this is our goal? Oh, I see. You know what I mean? There wasn't anything, there wasn't encouragement, there wasn't a constructive, helpful nature to any of the critique that I was getting. I had about enough of that, to the point where I got so nervous, I started slurring my words because I knew that my bosses were listening to me and were going to like pick me apart. And I believe that is something that comes along with anxiety called dysarthria, where if you focus so much and you're so tensed up, you might mispronounce something or your enunciation will go away completely because you're so hyper focused on it. And that was what was happening to me. And it was happening when I would say the station name because I was so nervous every time I turned that microphone on. And eventually my boss had enough of it and said, you need to fix this or you're gone. He locked me into a room. He locked me into a room and said, if you don't do this, I will get the owner and it'll be over for you. And at that point, I started looking for work elsewhere because to me, the concept of a 45-year-old grown man locking a 25-year-old woman alone in a room and threatening her income that way is not something I was willing to play with. I was like, if he's willing to get this crazy, I'll say it's crazy.
Yeah.
Who behaves like that? I don't think it just wasn't normal. So I said, if you're willing to do that, then I'm out. I'm not dealing with your ass anymore. Like, yeah, I can curse, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Like, I'm not dealing with your ass anymore. I'm like, no, we're done. And plus, I wanted a rock radio job anyway. But that was my first clue that something was in the industry. Like, it just wasn't right. And eventually I did get that rock radio job. And that's what took me to a different state, Minnesota, where I am now. And great job, fun job, got to be on, a rock radio station like I had always wanted to, but the same problems were there. I was finding out that a male coworker who came from the same town or like a very close, the same area of Pennsylvania where I grew up, had the same level of schooling, same level of job experience, was started $3,000 more a year than I was. That was That's when I started to smell something fishy. I said, don't know about that. We're close to this day. I have nothing against this particular coworker, but it was something, it was a red flag. I was like, okay, so now we have misogyny and chauvinism on the list here. And I should have seen that, because every radio station that I worked, I was one of maybe 2 female hosts, and that was it.
Yeah.
And the excuse was, well, we don't need another girl. But why not? Why not? What if she's able to offer something and do that job damn well? Why not? And I never seemed to get an answer to that question. And then I was subjected to those continual air checks that were just horrendous. And I had, a really hard time feeling like I was making my boss happy. And because I didn't feel like I was getting positive encouragement. So eventually I just said, to hell with the industry altogether. Like, I left him, I left the industry. I loved it, but I didn't get the sense that it loved me. And it wasn't because I didn't like the act of broadcasting. Clearly, I'm doing it now. It's still fun for me. The problem was the industry and how it was constructed. The fact that it didn't break new artists like I thought it would. The fact that it was entirely numbers driven. I mean, and that's messed with my psyche.
Yeah, and I want to start with, when you were younger too, very clearly early on, you knew what you wanted to do. This was your passion. This was, when you're a kid, you have a dream. What I'm hearing is someone that got her dream job, loved it, and then quickly was like, oh, hang on, this isn't what I thought it would be. And then I'm sorry that you had to experience that horrible situation. I'm sure many of my listeners can, sadly resonate with having a male figure, a male boss that's domineering or just a pig in a certain way, and that you had to go through that. And then at the same time at the rock station, I want to ask you a question, and it is, with all this criticism, and it sounds like you wanted to please, almost took away from your passion, and you were pleasing a boss rather than the audience and having the connection. How did your self-confidence and your self-esteem, how was that affected when someone was really critiquing every single word you were saying?
It shit the bed. Meaning like it went in the toilet. Like it went so bad that I got what we have in the US called a performance improvement plan. And you get what essentially it is your employer will serve you with a list of infractions that you've supposedly broken, allegedly broken. And they will say, if you don't shape up, this is a warning. If you don't change things, you will be terminated. So I was essentially served one of those because people thought I was being deliberately combative and deliberately disobedient. And there were some copyright laws that I didn't understand because I was not trained on them. That they informed me that I was breaking them. Just the stuff that I know now that I didn't know then. Ways to properly credit people photographers, ways to properly write captions that give appropriate people credit, or the avenues that you have to go through to get permission for these sort of things. We were not trained on, but we were expected to magically know. And so they dumped this list on me. And that was the night that I broke down, wanted to grab a bottle of pills and not wake up the next day. Because I could not, firstly, I didn't want to tolerate being in that environment anymore. And secondly, I felt like a fucking failure. I did. I felt like a failure because I was raised to believe that your job and your income stability is everything. It's the backbone of the family stability. So when you have that, you're screwing over the rest of the family. And that, not that it was necessarily true, but that was just sort of what I saw my parents do and what I saw them prioritize. So I had, I guess, inherited that from them. Even though my husband was wonderful and reassuring and told me, get the hell out of there. Like, I don't know why you're still there. He told me for months that I should have left. And I didn't. And the reason why I didn't is because I was afraid of that lack of stability when it came to our income. I didn't think, I was like, I have no other skill set. I don't know what the hell, which isn't true, but that's what depression and anxiety tells you. That's the lie that it tells you. So once I was in that spiral, just as well, it's hard to dig yourself out, and you start to think that there's no way out. And this is and it got to a point where I was like, oh no, offing myself would do my family a favor because they don't have to worry about me losing a job now. That's how convoluted and how misinformed I
It's
really
so real
was.
at the time. At the time, you can't
Yeah,
see
at the
any other
time,
way. Yeah.
right. Yeah, at the time, I that was how I was feeling. But so eventually, I continued to go to work even a week after that breakdown. And then I had a full-blown anxiety attack 10 minutes before I was going on the air a week later. And a coworker brought me to the ER. And what was emergency room, which to me, I didn't understand why they brought me there, because in my mind, you only go to the emergency room when you have a physical ailment. I did not know that they would just as easily take care of you if you have a mental one as well. If you're really suicidal, if you really are in crisis, if you're experiencing ideation, if you've actually attempted, they will not turn you away. So I was baffled by that at first, but it ended up being a godsend because they put me in touch with an outpatient treatment program that I did for about a month and a half. And that was how I got out of this. And then once I got out of the treatment program, I tried to work for another 3 months at the same company. And then eventually anxiety attack number 3 comes on. And that was when I called my husband from the bathroom crying. And I said, I need to quit today. I cannot do it anymore. But I said, I'm calling you to let you know that I want to do this. And he said, you should have done it months ago. Go into your boss's office and do it. And I said, all right. So that's what I did. I resigned, and there was absolutely no emotion in his face. And he said, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I looked at him and I said, personally, I said to his face, I said, JB, you and I have not meshed well for 2.5 years. We've been struggling with this. This shouldn't have been a surprise. I've asked you for help. I've asked to talk with you one-on-one, to work out our issues one-on-one, like adults. He refused to do that without anybody else in the room. And that was essentially the end of my terrestrial radio career here in the US. And ever since then, I haven't looked back, because I'm at it taught me what I need to look for going forward, that I have boundaries too, and that I have things that, I can expect from an employer just like anybody else can. It was ridiculous for me. And this is what radio did. It was ridiculous for me to feel like I had to be on call 24/7 for a radio station that wanted me to play like fart sounds and shit, which is like, I mean, it's funny, but I enjoy doing it. But it's like, you don't need to treat that type of job as though you're an emergency worker. And that's essentially how they wanted you to treat the job. And you weren't being paid any extra for it either. You were a salaried worker, and that was it. Period.
It sounds like that they had you on edge a lot of the time. Like you were really like on tenterhooks, you're on edge. And whether that was how they made you feel, or dangling the carrot going, if you don't do what we tell you, we're going to get rid of you. I want to check in with you and with how you experienced your panic attacks and anxiety and depression. Looking back now, do you think that was your body trying to show you the way, trying to help you, to show you that that job wasn't for you?
It was my body. Yes, I believe it was my body saying, you've neglected me, and now I'm going to force you to recognize something's wrong. Because that wasn't typical for me. It wasn't typical for me to cry when I put shoes on in the morning because I'm going somewhere. That should have been the first clue, but it wasn't. I wanted to power through.
Thank you for sharing that, because many of us want to power through. We'll be all right tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. Oh, everyone has an off day. but it's recognizing these signs, and our bodies won't stop until we do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like anxiety is a term that people just throw out very nonchalantly today. But when I say anxiety, I mean absolute extreme heart palpitations, body shaking, crying, mentally so worried that you cannot form another stream of thought other than whatever it is that's concerning you at that time. That's the type of anxiety we're talking about. And that's what, to me, that's true anxiety. I mean, we all get a little nervous about things, but to me, there's a difference between nervous and anxiety. And I just want to explain, like, that's the severity. And that's what I think true anxiety really is.
What would you share with, as we wrap up, what would you share with my listeners today that are listening, that they could be in a job where it's toxic, or they're not happy, and they could be feeling anxious, like you've explained, or depressed? Like, looking back at your younger self, but also to my listeners, what's something that you could say to them to help them through this moment?
I would say if your body is giving you clues, listen. I would say take advantage of the resources that are available. I don't think, at least in the US, I'm not sure about Australia, but at least in the US, I don't know that we do as good of a job as explaining what resources are out there for people when they're in crisis.
I think it's worldwide. Like, it's becoming more aware, but we could do so much more.
We could do much more. And, unfortunately, it takes a lot of personal research and using the internet, sometimes it's as simple as Googling mental health resources in wherever it is you're located.
Yeah.
That was a big clue. So I would say, listen to your body. If you're experiencing those feelings, if you're experiencing them on such an extreme level, yeah, that's a clue. Pause, pay attention to that, and really do some self-searching and saying, why is it that I'm feeling this way? And, try not to blame yourself as hard as that is, but just say, maybe look at it in an objective manner, as objectively as you can. This is happening. I need to investigate why. What is the source of this? And is this something that I can tolerate or not? Is this something that I need to change in my life? The answer might be yes. And if it is, go with that. I had a hard time doing that. I stayed in that position way longer than I should have because I wasn't listening to myself and my own thoughts. I was more concerned about financially supporting myself and my husband.
But that's a common thing I hear a lot. And personally, I've experienced that too. Been in a relationship for too long, been in a job for too long that I know I shouldn't have, been with a friend that wasn't good for me, but your friends, like, I think most of us stay in things longer than we should because on reflection or in hindsight, we have more information. But in that moment, we can only make decisions with the information we've got. But also when we're clouded by, it's a cloud. We can't think straight. We can't function. We can't do anything. And we're in this downward spiral, just going, I don't know what's happening. And I think if we let people know that this is more common than what people think and people are hiding it, but also if you are experiencing this, from what I believe to be true, it's your body saying something is off or something's not right or something's not for you. Like there's a reason why you're feeling like this.
Yes, pay attention to it and speak about it. Meaning, firstly, tell somebody that look, I'm struggling and I really might need help here, and be that direct, because most people aren't going to get little clues or little hints. You've got to be direct and just say, I'm feeling this way. I'm not okay. Can you suggest anything that I can do for this? Or can you point me in the right direction of somebody who could seriously help me with this? Don't be afraid to do that, because I was. And no job is fucking worth like all of that mental headache. It's not. I mean, can you imagine? I think about the fact, I'm like, there was a point in my life when I wanted to leave my husband and my cat behind. Who would be there for them if I was gone? They would be the trauma that I would have caused. Is that acceptable either? No. And I think when you put it that way, it's like, well, no, I don't want to do that. Might put some things into perspective. So yeah, I think overall, pay attention to your body, speak up when you are struggling, and put getting help as your first priority at the time, because everything else, it's simply not that important in comparison.
It's interesting because we all think broadcasting and radio is a bit like TV. It's a bit like a big happy family.
Right. I'm not going to pretend that there weren't glamorous moments. I mean, there were. I got to meet some really entertaining people. I got to be on tour buses. I got to be backstage.
Okay. I got to ask you. Who was the nicest or the nicest? God, Barbara, come up with a better word. You're talking to a broadcaster here. Who was the person that left the most impact in your life? Like a famous musician?
The famous musician that I really enjoyed meeting was Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters. And I know, unfortunately, he's since passed, but he really was a genuinely very laid back, but also good person. He actually came to us in Minnesota because he was part of, he acted as a mentor for one of our schools locally for their arts program. Yeah. And he would visit the kids every single year. And that was how I got to meet him. And he would play drums with them and interact with them. And he was way more interested in them than he was with us media, but I was fine with that. But I still did get a selfie. But no, people like that restore my faith, so to speak. And
is there anyone else that sticks out in your mind like that?
I would say Alicia Taylor, who she's the lead dancer in the Cherry Bombs. I mean, that dance company is hers, but some of you might know that she's married to Corey Taylor from Slipknot. So she really, for women specifically in metal, I love her sense of leadership. I appreciate how vulnerable she is online. And she spent time with me to record a podcast episode with me almost 2 years ago now. And just, she's willing to open herself up to her fans. And I think she is a good way of engaging with them. And that's something that I keep in the back of my mind and hope to model myself after. So she was another one. I'm trying to think who else. I can't think of anybody that Chris Jericho from Fozzy and wrestling, Y2J, met him. He was pretty cool. Other than that, I can't think of anybody that most of the world might know, because more of them are
anyone that's an idiot. Of course, we've got to ask that. Anybody
that's an idiot. To be honest, I really have been fortunate in that department. I really have not met anyone that's been a total dick.
Yeah, don't you know who I am?
Yeah, no. To be honest with you, I really haven't. I've actually lucked out in that department very much. Most people, at the very least, are, even if they're reserved, they're polite and they shake your hand and they say thank you and then they keep it moving. I've been
normal people at the end of the day. They're just normal human beings. But music for me too, I love that we're connecting today, because music for me personally and professionally is been a huge part of my life, and it changes. Sometimes I give my clients music homework. I get them to listen to a song, I get them to listen to lyrics, I get them to even just move their body. Actually just, we all have a song that the other day I can't remember what song, I actually can't remember what it was, but often I'm driving in my car and I'm singing, and I'm really into the 80s and 90s old school stuff right now. And then my phone rings and there's a space between where I'm singing and where my phone connects over, and I hear myself and I go, what? Oh my God.
You were doing a little concert.
But I sound terrible. I sound like a dead cat,
I can't sing either. As much as I love musicians and I respect their talent and what they do, I don't have a musical bone in my body. But that's part of why I chose to use the gift that I know I have, in
Yes.
order to share my platform with them. I was like, well, I can't play guitar. I tried, failed at that, but I can't do this.
Yeah.
And sometimes talking about getting out of ruts, and particularly in the workforce, it pays to consider those transferable skills. And what I mean is, if you baseline are, let's say, a good public speaker, or you have a great voice, well, that can transform to customer service, administrative work, filing paperwork and manning phones, communicating well, secretarial. That's essentially what I do now. That is my day job. I work at a hospital and I help out 3 orthopedic surgeons as their secretary. So communications is the backbone of that job. So if you have skills like that, it doesn't have to translate so literally, is what I'm getting at. That doesn't mean you have to be a broadcaster, but maybe because you speak well, your phone etiquette is awesome. And that helps you with communications and administrative work and communicating with patients or customers in some sort of customer service type of job. There's a million things. So think about that too. You're not as chained to your job or whatever it is you're doing that you're miserable at as you think you are. And the income, that's going to come and go. And that's natural for anybody. I mean, I learned that too. Like, as much as my parents wanted to hold on to their jobs, they got laid off from time to time. And it had nothing to do with their work ethic. It had everything to do with the industry they chose.
Yeah.
And decisions made by people with higher pay grades that shouldn't. But, it had everything to do with how that industry was functioning. So it's not always you that's the sole cause of what's going on with your job. You could want to hold on to it forever, but you only have so much control over it to begin with. And I think that's also helpful to remember.
And most of us don't like change. People will stay in a job for a very long time because they don't want change. Change is uncomfortable. There's no certainty with change.
Exactly.
Thank you for this. Oh, I love where our chat went today. It was,
Yes.
radio, broadcasting, anxiety, music, connection. I know I've got all your podcasts down in my show notes because I want people to connect with you. There's something for everyone. There's music, there's mental health, there's all sorts of supernatural, do you have a favorite podcast? Like, is there a one that's like your number one?
That's asking me to choose my child.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's asking me to choose my child because I birthed them. But no, I mean, the reason I guess why I crafted so many and why they have a specific line of discussion or a specific topic that everything falls under the umbrella of is because me as a person, Val the person, is interested in those things.
Yeah.
And some people are, some people aren't, but I created it to be a one-stop shop for anybody interested in X, Y, or Z. So I appreciate you recognizing it as that, because that's the goal.
And that's exactly how I see it. It's a little piece of you in all of it. And your gift is connecting people. And I have seen you've had some incredible people on your podcast as well. I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about.
I can't wait till yours comes out too. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Fun's a word. But I've just seen the caliber of guests and how you connect with them, and you bring a really strong message to the community and to people worldwide. This is so cool that I'm in Australia, you're over there, and that we're having this conversation and we're bridging people together because we all feel the same stuff.
I would have never imagined that this would be the case growing up. Like if you told me, like when I was a kid, like in the 90s, that someday I would be able to talk with somebody from Australia, video conference in real time, like what? Like as long as you understand the concept of time change, you got it. Like you can do that. That blows my mind that we have that ability.
Yep, I'm a child from, it wasn't until my 20s when cell phones happened. I've come from the generation where there was no computers, no internet, no Google, no nothing.
Yeah. For most of my life, I didn't either. Up until I was about, I want to say, I didn't have my first cell phone until I was 15.
Yeah.
And that was 2005. Like, and we still had a house phone at that time. We were still like, we only got rid of dial-up internet connections like 3 years before that. Like oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing because I believe that we meet people for a reason, and from us connecting, there's so many people who are going to get so much juicy, so much goodness out of it. And who knows where this connection is going to land. But I just thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to, have a chat with me.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it has inspired you on your self-care journey. Please feel free to share this with a friend and subscribe over on Apple Podcast. I really love hearing your feedback. So guys, please feel free to write a review on Apple and let me know which part of this episode resonated with you the most. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about Self-Care Studio or the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, self_care_studio, or on my website, selfcarebybarbaraThompson.com.au. Really look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Look after you. And I'll catch you soon. Bye.